The ballroom gleamed under golden lights, laughter rising like champagne. Bubbles, and the scent of vanilla and velvet draped the air. But for Thomas Banks, Chicago's youngest billionaire CEO, time halted. Across the gala floor she stood. Layla. She hadn't aged the way heartbreak ages people. No, she glowed. Her posture regal, her curls pinned with gold accents, a gentle calm in her expression. But that wasn't what froze Thomas. It was the toddler on her hip, and the 3 children gathered around her hem. One boy clutched a toy truck. One girl licked chocolate from her thumb. 2 more giggled near her ankles. 4 children. And Thomas knew. He knew from the curve of the boy's nose. From the softness of the girl's brown eyes. From the way their smiles tugged upward like his once had when he knew joy. They were his. He hadn't seen Layla in over 5 years. Since the night she asked him to choose. Since he picked career over family. Since he told her, coldly, decisively, that his empire needed him more than she did. That night, he walked away with $1 billion deal in hand. Tonight, he stood face to face with the cost. She held a baby on her hip, 3 more at her feet. And Thomas froze. Those were his eyes, his smile, his kids. If you've ever chosen ambition over love, if you've told yourself, I'll make time later, if you thought building an empire could replace building a home, then this story is for you. He built $1 billion empire, but gave up everything that mattered. Now she's raising the family he didn't know existed. And the man he was can't fix it. But maybe the man he's becoming can. Welcome to Mr. Victor Storytime. If this story touches your heart, makes you pause, or reminds you of something you once loved, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement keeps these stories going and helps us reach more hearts. Let's begin the journey together. 3 hours earlier, Thomas had been on stage. A navy suit tailored to perfection. A standing ovation before he even spoke. He'd just closed a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that put Reynolds Global ahead of every competitor in the investment world. Journalists hailed him as a genius. Colleagues called him a legend. He was the embodiment of power, precision, and discipline. But the applause meant little now, not after what he had just seen. He stepped away from the gala floor, loosening his tie as if it were choking him. The city shimmered beyond the glass walls of the Drake Hotel, but all he could see was her, Layla, carrying the future he walked away from. His mind replayed the last time he saw her. Candlelight, a painting of a family. Her voice trembling. This is what I want. He'd barely looked at the canvas. He'd been preoccupied with spreadsheets, global strategy calls, and an emergency board meeting. There will be time later, he had said, turning away. Now, staring into a world that moved on without him, Thomas realized something chilling. There hadn't been time later. Layla hadn't waited. She had lived. And she had created something beautiful without him. That painting. It still haunted him. A woman and a man holding hands in a field. 4 children running ahead. Sunlight in every brushstroke, hope in every corner. Back then, he didn't even hang it up. Left it wrapped in the closet of the penthouse she once tried to fill with warmth. His world had no space for dreams that couldn't be forecasted or monetized. He remembered how she stood there that night, barefoot, paint on her fingertips, heart wide open, and how he walked right past it. Now those 4 children were real. Their laughter from across the ballroom had rattled something inside him more than any market crash ever had. And for the first time in years, Thomas didn't feel like the architect of greatness. He felt like the ghost of someone else's miracle. He stepped out onto the terrace, hands trembling as he pressed his palms against the railing. The skyline mocked him. He'd built half of what stood before him, yet it couldn't fill the hole that seeing Layla had opened. His throat tightened. He wasn't sure if it was shame, or longing, or the recognition that he might never be allowed to undo the silence that followed that last conversation. He could almost hear her voice echoing. You said your career needed you. She was right. He gave it everything. But it never gave him back what mattered most. He stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching her. Layla had moved near the dessert table. Nala reached for a cookie with both hands, while Leo tried to balance a juice box taller than his tiny hands. Lucas tugged at Layla's dress, while Olivia danced in place to the soft music playing in the background. Thomas wanted to move. Say something. Anything. but his feet remained planted, guilt anchoring him. She turned slowly. Her eyes landed on him. No smile, no frown. Just recognition. She excused herself from a small circle of women, gently lifted Nala back into her arms and walked toward him. Each step seemed to echo. "Thomas," she said, when they were face to face. He cleared his throat. "Layla." Her gaze dropped briefly to his shoes, Italian leather, polished to perfection, the same kind he used to wear when he missed dinner after dinner. She lifted her chin. "These are my children," she said plainly. He nodded slowly, eyes bouncing from one child to the next. "They're beautiful. They're mine," she added gently, as if reminding him they were also not his. He opened his mouth, closed it, finally whispered, "I didn't know." "I know," she replied. Before he could say more, Olivia, the smallest, ran up with sticky fingers and bright, curious eyes. She stared at him, head tilted. "Are you Mommy's friend?" she asked. He bent down slowly, the weight of his tailored jacket pressing like guilt across his shoulders. I hope so." Layla didn't answer. Her eyes flickered, measuring not just the moment, but the years it had taken to reach it. Olivia laughed and twirled away. Thomas stood again, careful, unsure. "I know I have no right," he began. "You don't," she said, her tone neither cruel nor warm. "Just honest." He nodded. If you ever need anything, not as the man I used to be, but as someone trying to be better, I'd like to help." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she shifted Nala to her other hip, glanced at the children running, toward the chocolate fountain again, and finally met his eyes. "We'll see." And with that, she turned back to her world. He stood in his. But, for the first time in years, Thomas Banks wasn't planning his next move. He was remembering the last one that mattered. From the 88th floor of Reynolds Tower, Chicago looked like a city made for men like Thomas Banks. The skyline stretched endlessly before him, each building a symbol of capital, control, and vision. His vision. He sipped black coffee from a matte ceramic mug that probably cost less than the pen clipped to his chest pocket. Everything about the space around him screamed power. Sleek lines, minimalist leather, a glass wall behind his desk instead of art. Art reminded him of too much. His assistant had already texted twice, CNBC interview at 10, private jet scheduled for Houston at 3, dinner with the governor's task force at 8, and somewhere in between, Thomas was expected to finalize a buyout that would make him the youngest financial titan in North America to close 5 consecutive billion-dollar deals in under 3 years. He leaned back in his chair, not smiling, not celebrating, just calculating, always calculating. The headlines praised him, the relentless architect of Reynolds Global, the ICE strategist, the man who sleeps in blueprints. They didn't know the cost. He looked out the window, past the glimmer, past the clouds. There were no children running around this empire, no colorful paintings on the walls, no echo of laughter when he entered his penthouse. There was only success and silence. Thomas lived in precision. He woke at 4:45 a.m. every day without an alarm, meditated for 12 minutes. Peloton ride for 20. Quick protein shake, no sugar. 3 tailored suits rotated weekly, each altered every 2 months to maintain structure. No interruptions, no deviations. His calendar wasn't a schedule, it was scripture. Board meetings were held in a room where every executive sat straight and spoke in brief, meaningful terms. He respected results, not loyalty. Contracts were his form of connection. He didn't micromanage, he eliminated weak links. The empire he'd built wasn't just vast, it was sharp, surgical. There were moments, fleeting ones, when he'd walk through his penthouse and feel something like vacancy, rooms too large, glass too clear. He had an entire wing that hadn't been used in years. He tried dating. Once. She was a tech investor, stunning, brilliant, and gone after 3 dinners. "You don't talk," she'd said. "I listen," he replied. She never called back. He didn't blame her. Even in his inner circle, people referred to him as efficient, genius, composed, never warm, never vulnerable. Loneliness wasn't something Thomas admitted to. But it was there, in the silence of a dinner eaten alone, in the echo of a notification-free phone after midnight. He told himself he'd chosen this life. But some nights, he wondered what choosing the other path would have felt like. It was 6 years ago, a night he hadn't planned to attend. His CFO had dragged him to the local art fundraiser in Hyde Park, saying it would be good optics to show support for community engagement. Thomas had rolled his eyes but went anyway, expecting cheap wine and half-finished canvases. Instead, he saw her, Layla, in a rust-red head wrap and paint-splattered jeans. Her eyes danced when she laughed, her presence softening every corner of the gallery. While others mingled in curated conversations, she was barefoot near a canvas, talking to a group of children about mixing blues and yellows to make new worlds. He watched for 10 minutes before he even moved. When he finally approached her painting, a chaotic blend of gold and blue, it made no sense to him. Not in the way balance sheets did. "What inspired this?" he asked, genuinely curious. She turned, tilting her head. Her voice was warm and sure. "Choosing love. Even when life pushes you toward fear." He didn't understand it then. He would later. That night, they talked for hours. About art, about purpose, about the silence he'd grown used to, and the noise she embraced. She challenged him. He liked that. He called her 2 days later. She answered before the second ring. Layla's world was rhythm and soul. She lived on the south side, in a walk-up apartment filled with color and scent and music. Her walls were lined with unfinished canvases, candles, soft fabrics, and photos of smiling cousins. Her fridge had leftovers from a cookout she hosted 2 days earlier. Her neighbors knew her by name. Thomas's world was white marble, whisper-quiet hallways, and security codes. She danced in her kitchen when the mood struck. He scheduled his meals. She painted barefoot. He never even wore socks without starch. But somehow, the contrast didn't clash. It intrigued. Layla taught him how to slow down, how to sit on the floor and talk about dreams that couldn't be priced. He showed her how to leverage her art for real exposure and brand value. They balanced. For a time, her laugh-filled spaces he never noticed were empty. And for a while, he thought maybe, just maybe, he could live in both worlds. But slowly, his world pulled harder. Late meetings, missed dates, postponed promises. And every time she asked, when? He answered, soon. That word would be the rope that unraveled everything. It started like fire, hot, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. Thomas and Layla moved fast. 1 date turned into 3. 3 into weekends. By the end of the second month, he had a spare key to her apartment, and she had memorized his coffee order. They weren't supposed to make sense. A billionaire financial powerhouse and a barefoot painter from Chicago, South Side. On paper, it sounded like a collision waiting to happen. But in practice, it was electric. He took her to private dinners above the skyline. She took him to spoken word lounges and corner jazz cafes. He introduced her to oysters. She introduced him to gumbo. They built something between them that didn't follow rules or plans. It simply happened. She painted him once. Not a portrait. A moment. Him, sitting quietly in her studio, eyes not on his phone, but on her. She captured it in color, and when she unveiled it, he didn't know what to say, so he kissed her. They said, "I love you," after 4 months. He bought her a necklace with her birthstone. She whispered that she didn't need diamonds. She just needed him to show up. That was the first clue. But they were too in love to read the signs. Navy Pier became their place. They'd sneak out late at night, just to walk along the water. She wore big scarves and sneakers. He wore a baseball cap low to avoid being recognized. They shared funnel cake and sat with their legs dangling over the edge, laughing about everything and nothing. Thomas had never let himself be that unguarded with anyone before. She would lean her head on his shoulder and say, "This feels real." And for once, it did. He proposed in her studio. No flash. No audience. Just a velvet box tucked between her paintbrushes. Layla blinked. "You serious?" He nodded. "I've never been more sure." Their wedding was small, imperfect, beautiful. Her family danced to soft R&B and Afrobeats, passing around plates of jollof, macaroni pie, and peach cobbler. Her aunties wore bold prints and wiped tears as they hugged her. His family sat politely, sipping Chardonnay and smiling with controlled politeness. Her cousins cracked jokes, children ran through the backyard barefoot, and someone played Frankie Beverly on a Bluetooth speaker. His side looked overwhelmed. But Layla didn't care. Neither did Thomas, not then. They made it through that day, laughing at the awkward toasts and clashing playlists. They went to sleep in each other's arms. And for a moment, the two worlds. Layla wanted a studio downtown. A space with tall windows and natural light. A gallery show in Soho. A summer abroad painting murals for underserved schools. Thomas listened. And delayed. After this quarter, once I wrap this deal, just give me 6 months. But 6 months became 12. He missed her art shows. He sent flowers instead. He didn't notice how quiet she became when he talked numbers at dinner. She had dreams that didn't come with profit margins. She wanted a family, not later, now. Her doctor had told her early on, she might have trouble conceiving as time passed. She shared that with Thomas one night after dinner. Her voice soft, vulnerable. He kissed her forehead and said, "There's time?" She asked, "When will our life start?" He smiled, thinking it was romantic. But she wasn't smiling. Red flags weren't always violent or loud. Sometimes they were just ignored. She painted less. He traveled more. And the space between them widened, slowly, then all at once. He never raised his voice. He never cheated. But Layla stopped laughing during dinner. And Thomas stopped noticing. The first silence wasn't loud. It was just a missed dinner. Layla had cooked okra stew, jasmine rice, a little bottle of white wine she'd saved for something special. She wore a soft wrap dress, painted her nails. But Thomas texted at 6:32 p.m., running late. "Don't wait up." He didn't come home until after midnight. That night, she ate alone. She told herself it was fine. But fine became a habit. Missed dinners became missed weekends. His hugs became distracted. His voice, always calm, became distant. Even when he was home, his eyes were still in the office. Layla's paintbrushes dried out more than they danced. Her sketchbooks collected dust. She cancelled 2 exhibitions. When friends asked why, she said she was focusing on building stability. But in truth, she was waiting. Waiting for the version of Thomas that laughed with her at Navy Pier, that kissed her behind gallery doors. He didn't disappear overnight, but slowly, his ambition took the front seat. And her voice, her light, began to shrink. Layla had always wanted children, not just for the sake of tradition, but because she believed in legacy. The kind you leave in hearts, not in bank accounts. She watched her nieces grow up surrounded by aunties and cousins, laughter echoing through kitchens. She dreamed of having a little girl with Thomas's eyes, a boy with her smile. She even picked names, and painted soft outlines of what their nursery might look like. When she brought it up, again, one Friday night while they were on the balcony, he nodded absently. "Yeah, eventually." "Eventually?" she asked, searching his face. "Just not yet. Things are moving fast at the firm. You know that." "I also know life doesn't wait." He didn't reply. She tried again a few weeks later, this time with a soft plea. "Can we just talk about it seriously? Maybe not now, but soon." He placed a kiss on her temple, murmuring, "Let's get through 4th quarter first." Always quarters. Always numbers. Always pushing life for later. Layla didn't want to argue. She wanted to be understood. But each time she brought it up, she felt more like a burden and less like a partner. Her body clock ticked. His calendar beeped. Layla painted a canvas she never intended to show anyone. It featured a field under warm sunlight. 4 children ran with their arms outstretched. A couple, hands entwined, stood in the background, watching them with joy. There was no gold frame, just raw canvas and color. She finished it one Tuesday morning while Thomas was in New York. When he returned, she had it leaning against the wall in their living room, right where he'd see it as he walked in. He noticed. "New piece?" he asked, loosening his tie. She nodded. "Do you like it?" He glanced at it. "It's good. Big." She waited for more. But he had already moved on, checking emails, muttering something about a board call running over. That night, she sat across from the painting and whispered, "That's our life. If you'd just see it." He didn't ask what it meant. And she didn't explain. Because explaining love should never feel like negotiation. The night it broke wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Layla wore her softest dress. The same one she wore the night he proposed. She lit candles, set out their favorite takeout from the Thai spot near her old studio, and she stood by the door, waiting. He walked in past 9 p.m., his phone still pressed to his ear, his tie half loosened, his brow furrowed. She didn't greet him. She let him end the call, let him pour his whiskey, let him walk into the room and see the painting one more time. When he looked up at her, she didn't cry. "This," she said, gesturing to the canvas. "This is what I want." He blinked. "I told you." She raised a hand. "No more someday, Thomas. No more after the next deal. No more quarters." He opened his mouth, but she stepped closer. "Choose, Layla." She said it again, firmer. "Choose us or your empire." The silence was cold, crushing. Thomas looked at her, the woman who painted his soul, who gave up parts of herself just to stay close, and he said, "My career needs me right now." Layla closed her eyes, and her heart closed with them. The same pen signed both contracts. Monday morning, Thomas sat in the conference room of Reynolds Global's top floor, surrounded by lawyers, executives, and grinning stakeholders. The firm had just secured the Braverton Tech acquisition, one of the largest mergers in financial history. Cameras flashed. Hands clapped. His assistant brought champagne. The media buzzed with headlines. But Thomas didn't smile. Not really. Because that Friday, in the quiet stillness of his penthouse, he signed something else. The divorce decree. He sat at the edge of his granite kitchen island, a manila envelope in front of him. No lawyers, no champagne, just silence. He flipped through the pages. Every sentence was cold, clinical, final. His name beside hers. Thomas Banks. Layla Banks. Soon, only one would remain. He stared at her signature first. It looked steady, unshaken. It broke him more than he expected. With a slow, resigned breath, he picked up his pen. 2 signatures later, their marriage was legally over. The merger made headlines. The divorce didn't even get a whisper. But one changed the world. The other changed his life. She packed lightly. Not out of necessity, but out of choice. She didn't want to take too much from a life that had already taken so much from her. A few canvases, her brushes, old sketchbooks, a photo album from her childhood, and one framed photo of her and Thomas from a happier time, kept face down in the box. Her cousin Jamila came with a truck. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked gently, watching Layla tape up the last box. "I'm already doing it," Layla replied, tying her scarf and taking one last look around the condo that never truly felt like hers. The drive to the south side wasn't long, but emotionally, it felt like crossing galaxies. Still, when they pulled into her auntie's driveway, the world greeted her with warmth. Familiar, loud, safe. "Look who came home!" Her Aunt Dee shouted, arms wide, apron on, kitchen already smelling like healing. Kids from the block waved. Her old neighbor offered to help unload. Someone brought over sweet tea without asking. Home. Not high-rises and cold marble, but laughter, hugs, and space to breathe. She slept that night on a twin mattress in her cousin's spare room. And for the first time in months, she didn't cry herself to sleep. Healing didn't come like a tidal wave. It came in trickles. Morning coffee on the porch with her aunt. Sketching again under sunlight that poured through a window without blinds. Long walks to the corner store where people still called her by name. It wasn't fast, but it was real. She started painting again. Nothing grand, just color on canvas. Emotions she couldn't say out loud poured through her fingers. Her cousins hung her pieces on the wall. Neighborhood kids peeked in to watch. Jamila brought her to a women's circle at the local rec center. They didn't ask about her marriage. They just passed her the talking stick and let her say what she wanted. "I thought I failed," she admitted once. "But maybe I just got tired of waiting for someone to choose me." That confession changed everything. She started holding her head higher, smiling again. Cooking. Laughing. There were still days it hurt. But they were fewer. Her life wasn't restored. It was being rebuilt. By her own hands. It started with nausea. Then, fatigue. Then emotions she couldn't explain. Layla thought it was stress. Maybe grief. But Jamila squinted at her one evening and said, "Girl, you sure you ain't pregnant?" She laughed it off. Until she couldn't. A quiet visit to the clinic confirmed it. The nurse smiled gently after the ultrasound. "Well, Mama, you're not just pregnant. You've got 4 little heartbeats in there." Layla blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Quadruplets," the nurse said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're having 4 babies." Her breath caught. She sat in that small room, hands shaking, tears sliding down her cheeks. Not from fear alone, but from awe. From the weight of a future suddenly bigger than she imagined. She didn't call Thomas. She didn't tell anyone right away. She just walked home slowly, sat on her bed, and placed both hands on her stomach. "I've got you," she whispered. And she meant it. No matter what. Carrying 1 child is a journey. Carrying 4 is a miracle wrapped in exhaustion. Layla's pregnancy tested every limit of her body and spirit. She battled morning sickness that lasted all day, ankles that swelled like balloons, and a backache that refused to let her sleep more than a few hours at a time. But through it all, she never complained out loud. She journaled. She prayed. She painted tiny faces she hadn't met yet, imagining what each child might look like. Would they have Thomas's quiet gaze? Her smile? Would they move in rhythm or chaos? Would they come early? Would she be ready? She read every book the library had on multiples. She taught herself how to breathe through the panic. She memorized every appointment, every kick, every heartbeat. Even alone, she never let her children feel unloved. Each night, she'd whisper at her belly, "I'm not perfect, but I'm yours." And she meant it. News travels fast on the south side. When the community heard Layla was expecting quadruplets, they didn't just offer help, they mobilized. Aunt Dee organized meal trains. Cousin Nadine hosted a diaper drive. The church deacon stopped by with envelopes full of love offerings from Sunday service. Jamila's job gave her 3 weeks off just so she could stay close to Layla full time. Elder women came with peppermint oil and warm hands for swollen feet. Men from the neighborhood assembled cribs and moved furniture without being asked. And the kids? They turned her hallway into an art gallery, taping up their drawings of what they imagined the babies would look like. Her world, once quiet, now hummed with support. Layla didn't have to ask. They just showed up, because that's what community does. Because in her culture, motherhood wasn't a solo act. It was a collective promise. The contractions started at 3:12 a.m. on a warm Tuesday. Layla gripped the edge of her bed, teeth clenched, sweat forming along her brow. Jamila woke up instantly, barefoot and panicked but focused. "It's time," Layla said, voice tight. By 4:30 a.m., she was in delivery prep. The doctor was calm but firm. "They're coming early. But we're ready." Hours blurred. Pain. Push. Prayer. And then, Leo was first. Then Lucas. Then Nala. Then Olivia. Tiny. Wrinkled. Perfect. Each with a cry that filled the room and silenced every fear. The NICU team moved quickly, checking vitals and setting up warmers. Layla's eyes darted between the cribs, heart racing, breath shaky. Jamila held her hand. "They're here. You did it." Tears fell freely. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming truth that she was now a mother to 4 souls. 4 reasons to never look back. The hospital paperwork asked about the father. She left the line blank, not because she hated him, but because she had chosen a different kind of strength. Layla never dialed Thomas's number, never typed out a message she'd regret, never asked for help from a man who once chose everything but her. She forgave, but she didn't forget. Instead, she filled their nursery with love. Leo liked soft jazz. Lucas liked ceiling lights. Nala hated naps but loved humming. Olivia preferred being held chest to chest. She learned them like lyrics. She carried peace, not bitterness. Patience, not anger. Neighbors came by to babysit. Church ladies brought milk and lullabies. Aunties rocked the babies to sleep while Layla rested her tired spine. The house wasn't quiet. It was alive. She raised them with color, with music, with community. And when people asked, do they know their father? She'd simply say, they know they are loved. And that was enough. Reynolds Global was everywhere. Stock prices climbed with every quarterly report. Foreign investors called him before dawn. His photo hung in finance magazines, alongside headlines that praised his unshakable dominance. Thomas moved from acquisition to acquisition, stacking accolades, outpacing rivals, and delivering shareholder dreams. But it didn't feel like a victory. His corner office had grown larger. His penthouse higher. His team sharper than ever. But none of it filled the silence. There were no baby shoes by the door. No surprise art pieces on the fridge. No messy kitchen with laughter spilling out from it. Only polished surfaces. Clean. Cold. Still. He worked until midnight most days, even when he didn't have to. Meetings were easier than memories. Spreadsheets didn't ask if he was happy. Projections didn't whisper about what could have been. He saw his reflection more often than he saw the sky, and even that felt like a stranger. There were women. Stylish. Educated. Perfectly curated for his world. He took them to dinner, at exclusive places with no menus. Private chefs. Chauffeurs. Art collections. They admired more for the price tags than the technique. One woman, an attorney, kissed him in the elevator and asked, "What are you really looking for?" He said nothing. Another, a real estate executive, left her bracelet on his nightstand and never came back for it. They all knew the game. He was present in body, distant in spirit, cordial, never warm, generous with gifts, closed off with meaning. One woman called him a phantom in a custom suit. He didn't argue. He just let her leave. Because they weren't her. Not Layla. Not the woman who once danced barefoot in his kitchen. Not the one who painted their future and waited for him to notice. Every face he entertained faded quickly, not because they weren't beautiful, but because none of them had ever looked at him the way she did, like he was already enough, and now, he wasn't sure anyone ever would again. Thomas noticed the little things now. A father pushing a stroller past the park outside his office. A couple walking hand in hand while their toddler bounced between them. One of his senior partners brought their daughter to a meeting once. She colored at the conference table, humming quietly. Thomas couldn't focus the rest of that day. He avoided staff parties. He declined family-friendly galas. He skipped birthdays and baby showers his firm sponsored. But he noticed. And each time he walked away, something chipped at him. He'd built everything he thought mattered. But no one waited for him at home. No one squealed daddy. When he stepped through the door, his fridge had expensive wine, but not a single crayon drawing. The world called him powerful. But, in private, he felt invisible. Thomas kept Layla's number saved. He never deleted it. Some nights, after too much bourbon and too many hours staring at the skyline, he would type out a message. "Are you okay?" Backspace. "Do you ever think of me?" Backspace. "Can I see you?" Delete. He told himself it was for the best. She deserved peace, not disruption. And yet, beneath that reasoning, lived fear. Fear that she had moved on. That she hated him. That she no longer needed him. He had spent years making decisions with full confidence. But this uncertainty, it terrified him. Pride held his fingers still. Fear kept his silence in place. He convinced himself that not reaching out was noble. But the truth? He was afraid of hearing the words, "I've built a life without you," and more afraid that it was true. The Drake Hotel sparkled that evening. High ceilings, gold chandeliers, and a marble-finished ballroom welcomed Chicago's most influential. It was the annual Reynolds Global Charity Gala, an event where wealth shook hands, with philanthropy, and appearances mattered almost as much as donations. Thomas Banks stood near the center of it all. His tuxedo was flawless. His hair combed with precision. Cameras flashed as he made his way across the floor, smiling just enough to look approachable, but not enough to seem vulnerable. "Thomas, over here, Mr. Banks." One word for the Tribune. He answered politely, nodded, moved on. He had done this 100 times before. The gala was part of the brand now, a place to show face, secure investor confidence, and remind the city who sat at the top. But tonight felt different, not because of the speeches, not because of the press, but because of something he couldn't name, not yet. She hadn't planned to attend, but her friend Maritza, an event sponsor who ran a non-profit for urban youth artists, had insisted. They need to see the kind of woman you've become, she said. And so, Layla arrived. Emerald green gown, hair swept back with golden clips, heels that whispered grace on the floor. But it wasn't just the dress. It was the glow, the peace, the wholeness. She held Nala on one hip. Leo walked beside her, holding her hand. Lucas and Olivia moved just ahead, wide-eyed and giggling as they pointed at the chocolate fountain. They didn't know they were changing the air in the room. But they did. Servers paused. Conversations quieted. Eyes turned, some with curiosity, some with admiration. The children were vibrant, full of energy, their mother a steady light among chandeliers. And Thomas hadn't seen her yet. Not yet. Thomas, his assistant, tapped his shoulder. Your table's being prepped. They're about to start the auction. He nodded, but his eyes drifted. Across the room, just beyond the spiral staircase, his world stopped. There she was. Layla. He saw her before he saw them. The way her back straightened when she walked. The way her smile carried softness he hadn't felt in years. Then came the children. One on her hip. 3 more around her. He stared. Nala turned and looked in his direction. Their eyes met. His chest tightened. She looked like him. All 4 did. His feet refused to move. His throat closed. Thomas? Are you okay? Someone asked. He didn't respond. Because nothing, no award, no stock rise, no applause, had ever hit him like that moment. Layla hadn't seen him yet. She crouched to wipe chocolate off Olivia's chin, while Leo tried to pull Lucas away from the dessert table. Thomas took a step forward. Then another. Memories hit him like waves. Her studio. The night he said not now. The painting of the family she once wanted. He stepped onto the marble near her, unsure if his legs would keep holding him up. She finally looked up. Their eyes locked. For a second, she didn't react. Then, her expression shifted. Recognition. Then stillness. Nala squirmed in her arms. Layla turned fully to face him, her expression unreadable. Thomas swallowed hard. Layla, he whispered. She held Nala a little tighter. These are my children, she said. He stared at them, his features written on each of their small faces. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The ground didn't just shift. It vanished beneath him. The marble floor of the gala faded behind them. Thomas followed Layla out to the terrace. The city glittered beyond the glass railing, but all he could see was the space between them. 5 years' worth of silence stood like a wall. Layla set Nala down, her daughter immediately racing toward her siblings near a dessert cart inside. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she turned to him. You've been quiet, she said softly. He ran a hand over his face. I wasn't expecting to see you tonight. And yet, here we are. The night air was cool. A faint breeze carried the sounds of the gala in the background. Soft music, laughter, glass clinking. But their corner was hushed. Thomas finally met her gaze. Are they all mine? She nodded. Yes. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. Why didn't you tell me? Layla leaned on the stone railing. Because when I needed you to listen, you chose not to. I wasn't going to beg you to care. His jaw tensed. That's not fair. It's not, she said. Let me guess. You were busy? He didn't argue. Because she was right. She looked out over the lights of Chicago. You know, I used to think you'd come back. That one day you'd walk through the door and say, okay, Layla, let's build that life. He stepped closer, quiet. I never stopped thinking about you. But you did stop showing up. Silence. I asked you to choose, she continued. And you did. You chose boardrooms, mergers, headlines. And me? I chose a life, messy, loud, beautiful. Thomas's voice cracked. You think I didn't want that too? I think, she said, turning to face him, you wanted it on your terms, on your timeline. And love doesn't wait for spreadsheets. His hands dropped to his sides, useless. I made mistakes. You made choices, she corrected. Mistakes are accidents. You knew what I needed, and you said no. Her words landed with precision. I would have shared everything with you, she added. But I wasn't going to raise 4 children with someone who treated them like a calendar inconvenience. He closed his eyes. Shame spilled into his throat. You look happy, he said quietly. I am. The air between them shifted, not angry, not nostalgic, just honest. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on the railing. I've thought about calling, he admitted. 1,000 times. But I didn't know what I'd say. You wouldn't have had to say much, Layla replied. You just had to try. I was scared. Of what? That you didn't need me anymore. She let out a small breath, not quite a laugh. I didn't, she said. Not for survival. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't have meant something if you showed up anyway. His eyes watered, and he looked away. I missed everything. You missed everything, she echoed. First steps, first words. Leo dances in his socks like your old shuffle. Olivia's eyes go wide when she's curious, just like yours. Lucas thinks in quiet bursts. Nala hums while she paints. She smiled, just for a second. I wanted you to see it, she said, but I wasn't going to chase you. He nodded. Because what else could he do? Footsteps approached. Olivia, the smallest of the 4, toddled toward them, her little shoes tapping against the terrace floor. She stopped beside Thomas, looked up, and tugged gently at his sleeve. Are you Mummy's friend? The question hit like a freight train. Thomas crouched slowly, getting to her eye level. He blinked twice, trying to steady his voice. I hope I can be, he said. Olivia smiled and reached for his hand. Behind her, Layla watched. Not with anger. Not with forgiveness. But with consideration. Thomas stood slowly, Olivia still holding his hand for a moment before she scampered back inside. He looked at Layla again. I don't know what I'm allowed to ask, he whispered. Then don't ask, she replied. Just start showing up. And with that, she walked past him. Not with bitterness, not with promises, but with grace. The kind that says, if you really want to be part of this story again, earn your place. The following morning, Thomas sat alone in his office, the skyline of Chicago stretching endlessly beyond the wall of glass. But today, the view felt like a painting he'd stared at too long, familiar yet completely void of meaning. He had stared at the ceiling all night, haunted not by numbers or quarterly losses but by the face of a little girl who tugged his sleeve and asked, Are you Mommy's friend? He hadn't cried in years. Not when he made his first billion, not when Layla walked away. But last night, after returning from the gala, he finally broke. The silence in his penthouse wasn't peaceful anymore. It was screaming. He poured himself a coffee and walked to the window, flashes of memories tugging at his mind like ghosts demanding attention. He remembered that night 5 years ago, Layla in that soft dress, the painting, of a family, the warmth in her voice when she whispered, This is what I want. And how he had shattered that dream with a single sentence, My career needs me right now. Back then, he believed timing could be negotiated. That love was something you bookmarked for later. That children were something you planned once you'd made it. But last night, he met the living proof that life doesn't wait. He missed Leo's first steps. He missed Lucas's first words. He missed Nala's laugh when she learned to ride a bike. He missed Olivia's first fever, the late nights, the lullabies, the milestones. He missed being a father. Not just the title, but the chance to be the steady arms they ran to when life felt too big. He pressed a palm to the glass, his reflection staring back at him, not as Thomas Banks the billionaire, but Thomas Banks the man who had it all, and still lost the one thing that mattered. In that stillness, guilt came in waves. He didn't blame Layla for keeping the children from him. She was right. He had made a choice. And the truth that stabbed the deepest? She had done what he couldn't. She had chosen love over ambition. She had chosen to build a life, while he chased a legacy. His mind wandered to what their mornings might look like. 4 small backpacks by the door. Layla in a robe, making breakfast. Kids fighting over cereal. Nala humming to herself. Lucas asking too many questions. Leo sneaking extra syrup. Olivia always the last one ready. He would never get those memories back. He blinked hard, shaking himself out of the spiral. But he could face them. And maybe, if he was honest enough, humble enough, present enough, he could write a new story. Later that day, Thomas took a long drive through the neighborhoods he had forgotten even existed. No private driver, no black-tinted SUV. Just him in a basic rental car, driving down to the south side. It wasn't about showing up on Layla's doorstep. He wasn't ready for that. It was about understanding what he missed. He parked a few blocks from where she used to live, heart pounding like he was trespassing on sacred ground. He remembered visiting her here when they first dated. How alive everything felt. Music from porches. Kids playing outside. Neighbors calling each other by name. Community. He pulled over and watched a small park across the street. Kids running wild. Parents chatting under shaded benches. The kind of place you took your children on a Sunday afternoon. He saw a man sitting with 2 girls on either side of him, braiding one's hair and helping the other with her juice box. He watched them for minutes that felt like hours. That should have been me, he thought. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't anger. It was acceptance. He had denied himself the chance to become that version of himself, not because he wasn't capable, but because he'd convinced himself it wasn't the right time. Time. What a cruel illusion. You think you own it until you realize it's moved on without you. He thought about what it would have meant to be there for the ultrasounds, for the naming, for that first sleepless night after they were born. Would he have held Layla's hand in the delivery room? Would he have panicked at the sight of 4 babies all crying at once? Would he have whispered, "We'll figure this out," even when he had no clue how? He smiled sadly. The version of him back then would have fled. But the man he was becoming, that man wouldn't run. He sat in that car until dusk, letting the truth burn slowly through his chest. He couldn't rewrite the past, but he could learn from it. He pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and typed, "Being a father isn't about timing, it's about choosing to show up, even when you're terrified you'll fail." Then he closed it. He wasn't done growing. The next morning, Thomas found himself dialing a number he hadn't called in years. "Hello?" came the raspy voice on the other end. "Mr. Greaves. It's Thomas Banks." A pause. Then a chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. Thomas. Haven't heard that name in a while. I figured you were too busy running the world." "I was," Thomas admitted. "That's why I lost mine." Another pause. This time heavier. "I need to talk," Thomas added. "Can I come by?" An hour later he was sitting in the sunroom of a modest brick home in Evanston. Mr. Greaves, his first mentor in investment banking, had long since retired. The man who once taught him how to spot undervalued assets now tended to his wife's garden and made tea from scratch. "I thought you'd be in New York by now," Greaves said, handing him a mug. "I thought I'd be fulfilled by now," Thomas replied. The older man gave a knowing nod and sat down. "So, what's haunting you?" Thomas hesitated. Then it spilled out. The gala. Layla. The children. The shame. The silence. Mr. Greaves listened without interruption. When Thomas finished, the room went quiet, except for the soft ticking of a wall clock. "You remind me of myself," Greaves finally said. "Except I was lucky. My wife threatened to leave long before I let my pride swallow my heart." Thomas looked up. "What did you do?" "I quit," Greaves said simply. "Sold the firm. Bought a second-hand truck. Moved to a town where my kids could ride bikes safely. Never look back." Thomas blinked. "Just like that? It wasn't easy." "But love never is." Mr. Greaves leaned forward. "You can't force your way into their lives with apologies and flowers. Kids don't care about that. They care about who shows up on rainy days, who ties their shoes, who listens to their weird stories about dinosaurs and magic carrots." Thomas laughed dryly, then shook his head. "What if they don't let me in?" "Then you wait. You stand at the door, and you wait like a man who knows the value of what's behind it." He looked at Thomas with the same eyes that once critiqued his investment plans, but now saw straight through him. Money is the worst liar of all. It tells you that you have time, that you're powerful, that you're right. But love doesn't care about balance sheets, son. Love wants sweat. It wants humility. It wants your hands dirty. Thomas sat there, quiet. Then he stood, shook Mr. Greaves's hand firmly. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me," the old man replied. "Thank whoever finally cracked that thick shell of yours. Now go earn the right to be called Dad." Thomas stood in front of the same full-length window that once gave him comfort. But today, the Chicago skyline didn't inspire. It reminded him of everything he built at the cost of what he abandoned. For days, Layla's voice echoed in his mind. "You chose the world, Thomas. I chose a life." He knew he couldn't rewrite the past, but perhaps he could relearn how to be present in the now. After the gala, he hadn't contacted Layla again. He didn't want to intrude or force anything. He simply sat with the realization of what he'd lost, and what he never took time to understand. 4 children. Quadruplets. That word alone overwhelmed him with 1,000 emotions: awe, grief, wonder, and guilt. He hadn't been there. Not for the diapers, not for the colds, not for their first steps or sleepless nights. But he wanted to start now, not barging into their lives like a hero, but offering what he could: support. So he wrote a letter, not an email, not a text, a handwritten note. "Layla, I won't insult you by pretending I know how to fix what I broke. I'm not asking to be their father right now. I just want to support you, quietly, respectfully, however you'll allow. If there's anything you need, just leave me a note at Art House Studio. I've arranged with the manager there. No pressure, just a window, if you ever want to open it. Thomas." He didn't sign with love. He didn't include flowers, just the truth. And then, he waited. 3 days later, a single sentence came back on a scrap of recycled canvas paper. "Support means consistency, Thomas, not words." He read it 20 times. And instead of replying, he acted. He instructed his assistant to wire funds, anonymously, to the after-school program Layla's art students attended. Then, he quietly settled the property tax on the community center hosting her workshops. No credit, no signature, just action. He wasn't trying to earn points. He was learning how to give without expecting. He found himself reading parenting articles at midnight and watching YouTube clips of how to handle tantrums, child allergies, and what cartoons were educational versus overstimulating. Every small thing mattered now, even if he wasn't sure how much of it would ever reach them. At his office, he skipped late-night meetings, telling his board he needed personal time. They didn't understand, but he no longer cared. This was a different kind of investment, and for the first time, it felt like one worth making. The community newsletter had it listed. Art of Our Lives Youth Showcase, hosted by Art House Studios, featuring works from Layla Banks's 6 to 9-year-old art class. Saturday at 2 p.m. or Southside Community Hall. Thomas showed up 15 minutes early. No suit, no tie. Just jeans, a warm jacket, and nerves he hadn't felt since his first pitch as a young entrepreneur. The building was humble, but the energy inside pulsed with music, laughter, and bursts of color. Children's paintings hung along the hallway, squiggly suns, big-eyed animals, and hearts of every shape. He walked slowly, absorbing each piece like it held a secret to understanding his kids. And then he saw them. Nala had painted a sky full of birds, each with different colors and patterns. Leo's art was a messy but joyful collage of toy trucks, stars, and what looked like him and his siblings. Olivia's canvas was organized and neat. Rows of flowers, each labeled. And Lucas had drawn a massive city with a single small house in the corner, a family smiling in front of it. Each child had unknowingly revealed who they were. And it wrecked Thomas. He stood there, frozen, until a voice nudged him. "You're here." He turned. Layla. She wore a soft denim dress splattered with paint, her hair in a scarf, eyes guarded but not unkind. "I didn't come to make a scene," he said immediately. "I didn't come to ask for anything, I just wanted to see." Her eyes scanned him carefully. "You helped fund the new supplies, didn't you?" He hesitated. "Yes. But, anonymously." She nodded slowly. That matters. They walked through the space together, no hand-holding, no declarations, just silent steps of two people who once shared everything, now relearning how to coexist. Lucas doesn't like loud crowds, she mentioned as they passed a small reading area where he sat with headphones. Olivia loves labeling things. She'll tell you why yellow is the happiest color. Leo's the rowdiest. Broke 3 crayons today trying to shade a dragon. And Nala. She paused, glancing fondly toward the stage. She thinks she can fly. Thomas smiled faintly. She already has wings. Layla looked at him, almost surprised. You remembered how I used to describe my dreams. I never forgot them, he whispered. Later, when the children came up to share their art, he didn't interrupt. He stood in the back, clapped, laughed, and took quiet joy in watching them shine. And when the show ended, he left before they noticed him. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to see. And Layla, she saw that. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, Layla sat alone in her studio. The smell of tempera paint and old crayons lingered in the air. Her hands were stained with color, but her mind wasn't on her canvas. It was on Thomas, the way he clapped at Olivia's flower speech, how his eyes softened when Leo waved his messy drawing, how he didn't step forward, didn't take credit, didn't try to insert himself, just observed. It was jarring. This wasn't the Thomas she remembered. The man who always needed the spotlight, who controlled every room. This version was quieter, softer, changed. She wasn't naive. One art show didn't erase 5 years of absence. One check didn't buy back 4 childhoods. But something about the way he knelt to listen to Nala, just as the little girl explained that her bird drawing had different feathers because everyone's different, but they still fly together. That moment stayed with Layla. She hadn't told the kids yet about him. They just knew Mommy's friend was kind, quiet, and sometimes left snacks behind when he visited the art center. She watched from the upstairs window a few nights later as he quietly dropped off art kits for every student, then drove away. No grand gesture, no note, just showing up. Consistency. She remembered her own words. Support means consistency. And she couldn't lie to herself. He was trying. Still, fear lingered. What if he vanished again? What if the kids grew to love him, and he disappeared when work called again? She couldn't afford to risk their joy for hope. Not yet. But she found herself saving the drawings he commented on, replaying the things he noticed, watching her children's laughter, and wondering how much more vibrant it might be if Thomas kept showing up, not as the man she once begged to stay, but as the man who now chose to try, one small, deliberate step at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that was a start. It started with awkward silence. Thomas Banks stood at the edge of the community park, wearing a polo shirt and jeans, his most casual outfit in years, trying to smile as 4 tiny humans buzzed around their mom like planets orbiting the sun. Leo was chasing a butterfly. Lucas was trying to build a ramp with sticks. Olivia was twirling barefoot in the grass, and Nala was sketching the flowers with a quiet focus that reminded Thomas of Layla. He kept a safe distance, not wanting to push. Not anymore. Layla sat on a blanket nearby, watching her children, a soft expression on her face. They'd come here a few times before, but this was the first time she'd allowed Thomas to join them in a casual setting. No gala suits, no boardroom talk, just juice boxes, wet wipes, and grass stains. When Nala approached her mom asking for more paper, Layla gently nudged her daughter toward Thomas. "Ask him," she said. Nala hesitated, then walked up slowly, cautious eyes studying the man she wasn't sure what to call. "Do you have more paper?" she asked. Thomas's heart nearly stopped. Yes, I do," he stammered, reaching into his bag. He'd prepared everything. Sketch pads, markers, even washable paints. She blinked, surprised. "Thanks. You're welcome," he replied softly. She returned to her spot under the tree. Later, Lucas wandered over and, without warning, handed Thomas a half-melted chocolate chip cookie. "You dropped this," he lied. It was clearly his cookie. Thomas accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thanks, buddy." Small steps, but they mattered. By the end of the day, he had played catch with Leo, helped Olivia climb a jungle gym, and watched Nala draw a picture of the entire family, him included, standing off to the side, but still there. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a welcome. But it was something. And to Thomas, it was everything. Thomas returned every week. He didn't make promises. He didn't ask for titles. He just showed up. One Saturday, Layla opened the door to find Thomas already outside. Paint, stained clothes, a folding table, and a crate of finger paints. The kids screamed with joy. Art day. Olivia shouted. They set up in the backyard, and for hours, Thomas helped them create colorful chaos. Lucas painted superheroes, Leo made messy handprints, Olivia mixed every color into a glorious brown sludge, and Nala made a serene landscape that left her mother in awe. "Where'd you learn to paint like that?" Thomas asked, leaning over her shoulder. "I watch Mummy," she said without looking up. Thomas smiled. "She's a good teacher." That evening, Layla handed him a damp towel as he cleaned up. "You smell like markers and juice boxes," she teased. He chuckled, wiping his face. "Honestly, it's the best I've smelled in weeks." Another time, when Olivia had a minor meltdown at school pickup, the staff at the front office blinked. In confusion, as a sharply dressed man in a tailored jacket knelt and patiently tied her shoe. "Olivia," he whispered. "What's wrong?" "She forgot her teddy," the teacher explained. Thomas didn't flinch. "We'll stop by the store. You pick the fluffiest one, okay?" Olivia nodded through sniffles. By the time they left, she was hugging his leg and humming to herself. Even the school counselor noticed the shift. "Are you a family friend?" she asked him privately. He hesitated. "I'm working on earning the right to be called something." The woman smiled. "You're doing all right." That night, when he dropped the kids back at Layla's apartment, they waved goodbye with genuine joy. Thomas drove away in silence, heart aching in a strange, beautiful way. He had conquered boardrooms and stood on Fortune magazine covers. But nothing compared to Nala's quiet trust, or Olivia's laughter in the back seat. Thomas's world began to shift. He didn't cancel meetings, he scheduled them differently. He didn't ditch deals, but he delegated more. For the first time, he began choosing presence over power. One Thursday, he joined Layla and the kids at a community storytelling night. Sitting on the floor of a church rec center, surrounded by pillows and paper lanterns, he listened to local elders tell stories of resilience, laughter, and love. Leo leaned against him. Lucas whispered jokes. Nala kept correcting the storyteller's facts. Olivia fell asleep in his lap. He missed a dinner with international investors that night. He didn't regret it. On another day, he found himself in a grocery store, pushing a cart filled with string cheese, crayons and cereal, while Lucas insisted on singing a made-up song about banana battles. Thomas laughed out loud, really laughed. A woman passing by stared, clearly recognizing him. "Mr. Banks?" she said, stunned. "From the Forbes list?" Thomas blinked. "Today, I'm just a dad in aisle 4. Later, Layla would tell him, "I used to beg for this version of you." He met her gaze. "I'm still trying to find him." She didn't answer. But she didn't shut the door either. And so, week by week, moment by moment, Thomas began to live a life he never knew he needed. Not flashy, not curated, just real. It hit him one night during bedtime stories. The kids insisted he read, Olivia clinging to his arm, Lucas pretending he couldn't to understand the words, Leo asking deep questions like, "Do clouds get tired?" and Nala correcting his grammar. Layla watched from the doorway, arms folded but smiling. As he closed the book, the kids piled around him in a tangle of limbs and blankets. Thomas stared at the ceiling, heart full. This was wealth. Not the kind you could measure in profit margins. The kind built in pillow forts and sticky hugs. Later that evening, he and Layla sat in the living room sipping tea. "I used to think I had to build an empire to matter," he confessed. "You already mattered," she replied gently. "You just didn't know how to stay." "I want to now," he said. She didn't promise him anything. But she didn't ask him to leave either. That was enough. The next day, Thomas declined an international keynote in Singapore. He sent his junior partner instead. Why? His assistant asked, baffled. Because Lucas has a science fair, he replied. And just like that, power stopped being his drug. Love became his compass. Presence became his legacy. And for the first time since his billion-dollar days began, Thomas Banks was finally becoming a father, not just a financier, not because he had to, but because he chose to. One bedtime story, one tiny step at a time. The days that followed the gala were oddly quiet for Layla. Not because the kids were any less energetic, or because her art studio wasn't buzzing with orders for her latest motherhood series, but because something deeper had stirred. Thomas had asked for nothing, no meetings, no phone calls, no requests to explain the kids. He didn't even send flowers. Instead, he respected her silence, and that, in itself, said more than 1,000 apologies ever could. But silence wasn't enough. Not for what she'd survived. She needed proof, not gestures, not charm, not wealth. Growth. So, when a children's literacy fundraiser needed a volunteer father for the weekend story hour, and Thomas offered to help when he saw the flyer in her studio window, Layla didn't say yes. She said, "We'll see." Saturday morning came. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Olivia had braided Layla's hair in uneven plaits, while Lucas kept flipping through a dinosaur book. Then came a knock. Not a chauffeur. Not a delivery. It was Thomas. In jeans, holding a small book bag and 4 gently used children's books in his hand. "I didn't want to show up empty," he said. Layla didn't smile, but she didn't shut the door either. He read, "I am enough to the circle of toddlers," with a voice that trembled at first, then steadied. He let Olivia sit on his knee, allowed Lucas to turn the pages ahead of time. He didn't flinch when Leo spilled juice on his crisp white sleeve. He just stayed. That night, after the fundraiser, Layla and Thomas walked slowly back to her building. The children had run ahead, racing to the steps with squeals. "I'm not testing you," Layla finally said. Thomas nodded. "I know. But I am watching." He turned to her. "Then I'll keep showing up, until you stop needing to." That was the first night she let the kids hug him goodbye without calling them back. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was trust being tested in real time. By spring, Chicago had begun to bloom again. Cherry blossoms brushed against brownstones, sidewalks filled with music from open windows, and, in a quiet corner of Hyde Park, Layla stood beside Thomas at the community garden she co-managed. She didn't invite him, he showed up anyway. In boots, not loafers. With gloves, not a checkbook. "I heard the compost pile needed turning," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Figured it's time I learned to do the dirty work." Layla didn't laugh, but the way her eyes softened told him the joke landed. Trust wasn't in words for Layla. It lived in patterns, and Thomas knew he had none to spare. He had broken every rhythm she'd once relied on. Now he was rebuilding, slowly, in rhythm with the soil. He planted marigolds with Nala. He helped Leo write his name in chalk on the garden wall. He let Olivia supervise while he tried to hammer a trellis into place. Badly. At one point she leaned in and whispered, "You know nothing about plants, do you?" "I used to think success just needed sunlight," he replied. "But maybe it needs rain and pruning too." Layla turned away before he saw her smile. Later that afternoon, while packing up empty seed trays, Thomas paused. "I don't want to skip steps." Layla looked at him carefully. "I don't want to win you over with dinners and flowers and forced smiles. That's not what we lost." She nodded, appreciating his clarity. "What did we lose?" she asked gently. He didn't hesitate. "We lost us." And just like that, trust grew. Not romance. Not declarations. Just the slow planting of possibility. "I've been in therapy," Thomas said one evening, after Layla offered him tea and the kids had fallen asleep on the living room rug. It was the first time he'd been invited into her home, not just her garden, not just the community spaces, but her home. The space where her laughter echoed, where pictures of their children danced on walls he hadn't painted. Layla looked up slowly. "I started 6 months ago. At first, I told myself it was just to cope with the stress, but eventually, I realized I needed to face the man I became when I chose ambition over love." Her hands stilled on her mug. "It's humbling," he continued. Realizing success doesn't erase childhood wounds, doesn't fix absence, doesn't make you a good man. Layla watched him, carefully, quietly. I also appointed a second-in-command, he added. I'm stepping back from the day-to-day at the firm. You're leaving Reynolds Capital. Not leaving. But I won't let it parent me anymore. I've missed enough bedtime stories. Silence lingered in the space. Then she asked the question she had avoided for weeks. Why now? He exhaled. Because I met my children. And they're everything I never knew I needed. You didn't want them before, she reminded him. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid I'd fail like my father. Afraid I'd never know how to love without controlling everything. Her throat tightened. But now, he added, I'm more afraid of missing out on their lives than I am of failing. She nodded. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't promise anything. But she didn't ask him to leave. And in the world of healing, that was everything. Summer arrived, and with it came the opening of Layla's solo exhibit titled Roots and Redemption. The studio buzzed with press, collectors, and children running between easels. Thomas stood by the snack table, offering juice boxes and gently fixing Leo's collar. No cameras, no announcements, just a father present. Layla's final piece, titled Harvest, was an abstract swirl of 4 small suns circling a grounded tree. Why suns? One reporter asked her. Because children don't orbit us, Layla said simply. They light us up. Thomas watched from afar, heart swelling. Not from pride, but from realization. He wasn't chasing her anymore. He wasn't chasing anything. He was building. On Tuesdays, he did school drop-offs. On Thursdays, he helped Olivia with spelling, badly. On Sundays, he and Layla co-hosted pancake brunches for the kids and neighbors. One morning, while watching Nala fall asleep on his shoulder, Layla whispered, "You're showing up." He looked at her, eyes full of quiet hope. Because I want to build something real, not flashy, not fast, just full. She leaned against him, not in love yet, but in something softer than distrust. I'm not promising anything, she said. I'm not asking, he replied. And for once, Thomas Banks, the man who once ruled rooms, owned skylines and silenced negotiations, with a stare, was content to sit quietly, surrounded by sticky fingers and bedtime songs. Because the empire he now valued most didn't sit in a tower. It giggled, painted, and called him Daddy.